So I'm going to show you how to cover your cake with sugar paste. And I'm going to be using a dummy cake for this, but obviously you'll be using a real cake. The most important thing to think about with your cake before you put your sugar paste on is the foundation layer. So I would recommend giving your cakes a good layer of ganache underneath your sugar paste, or if you prefer to use buttercream you can, but ganache gives a much better result, especially if you're working on taller cakes and you want to create a sharp edge. So get your ganache layer on first and make it as precise as you can. I always say it's like wearing the right underwear under an evening dress. If you get all your lines right underneath, then your evening dress looks smooth and beautiful. And it's the same with ganache underneath your sugar paste. So I'm using the sugar paste today, which is my favourite sugar paste. You want, especially if you're covering tall tiers, a deep tier, you want to use a sugar paste which is really nice and stretchy, and that's going to stop any risk of it breaking around the top or leaving that elephant skin that we all don't like. So a nice stretchy sugar paste is essential, and I've already given this a good old knead. And I'm going to be rolling this out on my table here, and I'm going to use my king pin, but you can use any other rolling pin that you have. My table is non-stick, so I know that my sugar paste isn't going to stick to it, but if you struggle with your sugar paste sticking, I can recommend using a little bit of corn flour in a shaker. Corn flour will help everything not stick, but equally it won't make your paste sticky, which sometimes if you use icing sugar, it can make everything go a bit sticky. Corn flour is really good for stopping things getting sticky, so I can definitely recommend using corn flour. So I'm going to start rolling my paste out. As I said, I've already kneaded this and I've made it slightly flatter to get started. And I'm just going to start giving it a good old roll with my rolling pin. Now, if you're covering something round, you want to try and roll your sugar paste round because it's easier in the long run to get a nice, to get a nice round piece of paste. It's easier to cover your cake with. So I like to roll around the edges of my paste just to get my nice round shape, go around the edges, and then roll through the middle to make sure you haven't got a dome in the middle. And you can see that I'm keeping my rolling pin moving. I'm not just going backwards and forwards. I'm rolling all the way around. I'm going to carry on going round until I'm happy that my paste is thin enough, and keep picking up your paste and moving it. So I'm going to pick it up and move it round. And that means that your paste isn't sticking to the table, but it also means that you can get a good amount of pressure all the way around your paste. So I'm just going to carry on rolling. And we're looking for our paste to be about 3 millimeters thick, so not too thick. You don't need a really, really thick layer of paste. It actually works a lot better and covers a lot better if your paste is thin. Obviously not so thin that you can see the cake through it, or a dummy. You wouldn't want to be able to see the cake or the dummy or the ganache through it. But if it's about 2 to 3 millimeters, you should be absolutely fine. So I'm just going to carry on going, and I'm going to show you the right thickness. It's a little bit of an arm workout, and there are various tools which can help you with this. So you can get pasteline machines which will roll your paste for you. You can also get these rolling mats, and these are silicone mats that you lay on your table and you can roll between the silicone. So if you get really stuck with your paste sticking all the time, these are a real boon for that because they stop things sticking. So I'll just put that back down there. But I wanted to show you the good old-fashioned way today. So I'm about to the right thickness. You can see it's roughly the right thickness. It's slightly too thick, so I'm just going to roll a little bit more. If I'm covering a dummy, then I tend to try and keep my paste ever so slightly thicker, just because I don't want to see the texture of the dummy through it. So I'm quite happy with this for my dummy. But if I was covering a real cake, I would take it a little bit further. Okay, so that is my paste rolled out. Put your rolling pins safely somewhere because they're super heavy. And you can see I've got a nice regular thickness paste. Make sure it's not thicker in the middle. So you can see the thickness there. Now, if you feel that you've got any air bubbles in your paste, and sometimes with the kneading process, you might get a few little bubbles in there, you can feel them when you run your hand over the paste. You can use an acupuncture needle, I've got a few here, which are really fine pointed needles, and you can use one of these to just pop your bubbles. So I can feel, I've got a couple here, and they've got such a fine point that you won't see the hole once you've popped them. They also come in sterilised packaging, so you know they're super clean. I'm just going to pop any more bubbles. There we go. And that's my paste, nice and bubble-free and ready to go on the cake. So I'm just going to roll this paste up over my rolling pin because that's the easiest way to move your paste. Now, a piece like this isn't actually too bad to move because it's not too big, and I could lift this up in my hands and flop it over the cake. But if it was any bigger than this, you would risk kind of stretching it and getting some thin patches. So you want to use your rolling pin to lift it up. So I'm just going to roll it up over my rolling pin, just like that. And I'm going to bring my dummy cake in. And then I'm just going to unroll it over my dummy cake. That's the problem with dummy cakes. They tend to move a little bit because they haven't got the weight of an actual cake. I've got my dummy on a ganaching plate actually, but a board would do, just so that it's not directly on the table. It's a little bit easier to handle. Now you can see that my paste is roughly the same length as the cake. And because this is a nice stretchy paste, I haven't got to worry about any breakages around this top edge because I know it's going to stretch nicely. So even if it's slightly too short, it's going to stretch as I start moving it around and not leave any stretch marks. If you're using a paste that you know maybe doesn't stretch quite as much, I would roll your paste a little bit longer so that it will flop over the edge a little bit. Not too big though. If you roll a really huge piece of paste and you've got a huge skirt around the edge, it makes it really difficult when you're coming to cover it and trying to get it nice and smooth. So just try and roll it so it's just about the same size as your cake. And I've got it on here now, and I'm going to smooth the top with my hands because I want to make sure that I'm paying attention to this top edge. And I'm just going to push that top edge onto the cake and make sure it's nice and secure. So I always go around the top edge first, just to make sure it's not going to go anywhere. And when you run your hand over the top of the cake, just feel for if there's any air bubbles. And I can feel there's none there. But if there were any bubbles, you can either lift your paste slightly and let them out, or you can use your acupuncture needle again. So make sure there's no air bubbles and then smooth around that top edge. And then we're going to start smoothing our paste down. So I'm just going to pull it away from the cake and then use my hand to just smooth it down. So pull it away and smooth it down. You need to sort of keep untucking it and smoothing it down. And take your time because you can't rush this bit. Keep going round. You can use a turntable if you want to, but I tend to find I find it a little bit easier without a turntable. So keep going round, smoothing it down with your hand. So pull it out and smooth it down. And I'm going to carry on going round until it's all smooth on the edges. There we go, we're almost at the end now. And I'm just going to tease this last bit out. And this last bit tends to be the bit that people get stuck with. So I don't want to squeeze it together and cut it or anything. I just want to get rid of it. So again, I'm just going to pull it out and just keep teasing it. So pull it out and stretch it a little bit and just use your hands to tease it down. And again, you might have to just go round some of the little bits that you've been before. So again, pulling it out, tease it down with your hands, and you should have a nice covering all around your cake. Now, before I put the sugar paste on, I didn't say to you, you want your sugar paste to stick to whatever you're covering. So whether it's ganache or buttercream or a dummy cake underneath, you want to use some sort of moisture to stick your paste to the cake. If I'm using ganache, which is what I always do, then I use vodka to stick my sugar paste to the ganache. So I'll just brush the ganache with a thin, very thin coat of vodka. All the alcohol evaporates, so it's, no concern there, but it gives you an antibacterial seal between the cake and the sugar paste. If you don't use alcohol, you can use cooled boiled water, but you need to boil it first just to get rid of any nasties that might be in the water. If I'm using a dummy, then I'll just use water because nobody's going to eat it. But if you're working on an actual cake, alcohol or cooled boiled water, just to get your sugar paste to stick to the surface that you're covering. So my paste is on there now. And the next thing I'm going to do is get rid of some of this skirt. So I've got a nice sharp knife and I'm just going to cut round, and I'm going to leave about 1 centimetre here. I'm not going to try and cut really close to the cake because I want to make sure that I've got a really nice finish on the bottom. So I'm going to leave a little bit of space, and I'm going to show you how I get a really nice finish on that bottom edge. Get rid of your paste. Good idea to wrap it in cling film at this point so that it doesn't go hard. I'm just going to put mine there for now. And then what I do, and covering cakes is a very personal thing, but this is the way I do it, is I use a cake tin that's slightly smaller than the cake I'm covering, and I will lift my cake up, pop it onto the tin, and I'm going to move it over, and I'm going to just start smoothing down the paste. So it comes down over that bottom edge. I'm going to smooth it down with my hands. Because a lot of my cakes don't have ribbons around the bottom, I like to make sure that my bottom edge is really, really perfect. Now, if you've always put ribbons around the bottom of your cakes, you don't necessarily need to put as much care and attention into this bit, but I'm just showing you the way that I do it. So got my paste all the way down, and then I'm going to use my knife again, and I'm going to put it in to the paste so that it is flush with the bottom of the cake, and then I'm just going to run it round. I'm just going to push that back down again. You need to make sure it's stuck on that bottom edge. I'm just going to run it round and try and keep your knife as flush as possible to the bottom of the cake. Make sure that's nice and stuck. And I do this whether it's a real cake or a dummy. This is exactly the same process that I use. Absolutely the same process. I'm just going to go all the way around until I've got rid of that excess paste. Now, that little bit of paste that I've just chopped off, that would have ganache on it because you'll have trimmed a little bit from that bottom. So that bit I always throw away. I don't mix that in with my paste because you'll get nasties in there. So once you've trimmed that edge, I'm going to use a rigid smoother. Now, I use a rigid smoother, a hard smoother that has straight edges. I don't like the curved ones because in a minute I'm going to show you that I want to use that straight edge to push down onto the board. So nice straight edges, straight corners, hard smoother. And I'm just going to run that around the bottom edge just to make sure it's all stuck and it's all nice and smooth. There we go. All stuck, all nice and smooth. And then I'm going to pop my cake. I'm going to turn that over because it's got a little bit of moisture on it from where I moistened my cake dummy. And just pop my cake back on my board. get rid of my tin. And you can see that the bottom edge is already quite clean. So we're going to come back and give that a little bit more attention in a second, but let's talk about sharp edges, because we all want to get sharp edges on our cakes, and you know, they look super lovely and clean and crisp on a cake. So I'm going to show you really quickly the way that I achieve mine. Now I use, again, my hard smoother with the straight edges. And I love a flexi smoother. I like to use flexi smoothers to get my my corners, my sharp edges. Now, you can do this with 2 flexi smoothers, so you can use one on the side and one on the top, and that's absolutely fine. But I prefer to use a hard smoother on the side and a flexi smoother on the top, just so that I can feel under my fingers what the flexi smoother is doing, but I don't put too much pressure on the side of the cake and make dents in it. So that's where the hard smoother is, I find, better. So I've got my flexi smoother on the top, and I'm just going to give it a little polish, just to, you know, get rid of any big lumps. And I'm going to put my hard smoother against the side, and I'm just going to start pushing with this finger, this top finger here, the top finger of the flexi smoother. I've got it really close to that edge. And I'm going to use that finger just to push the paste in against that hard smoother. So I'm just squeezing it against the hard smoother. I'm going to move it around. And again, I'm just going to push it with that finger on the edge against that hard smoother. Just squeezing it and pushing it against it. And you can see I'm already starting to get a really nice crisp edge. So it's as simple as that. Now, lots of people do sharp edges in different ways. But this is the way that I find works for me. So you might want to experiment with using maybe 2 flexi smoothers, or, you know, try it this way if you've never done it before with the hard smoother and the flexi smoother. I'm going to carry on round until I've done all of the edge, and this bit shouldn't take you too long. You know, you should be able to sort of feel that paste in your fingers, little tiny movements. You just want tiny, tiny movements as you're moving round. You're kind of moving millimetres at a time as you're going round, and then keep smoothing it back. Just make sure it's nice and smooth. If you've got a nice covering of ganache under your cake, you'll be able to put quite a lot of pressure on it. So don't worry about that side of things. And keep going all the way around until you've got back to the beginning. You might find that you have a little air bubble in there, and again, just use your acupuncture needle just to get rid of any air bubbles that you might have. So I've gone all the way around now. Got a nice sharp edge that I'm happy with all the way around, and I'm just going to use my hard smoother just to give the whole cake a good old polish. Make sure there's no lumps or bumps. They just go all the way around. Making sure I've got a really nice finish on it all the way around. And you can use your flexi smoother for that as well, just to give it a nice little polish. And if you're putting your hand on the top, like I am, to secure it, then you might need to just give that another little polish over the top, because you might have a nice handprint in it. There we go. And the last thing I'm going to do is have a look at this bottom edge. So I said about the bottom edge here, and you can see there's a little bit of a gap. So all I tend to do is just run my my hard smoother all the way around that bottom edge, just pushing down. Now, when you push down, you want to push down with the whole smoother, not just, don't push in with that bottom corner. You don't want to just push it in, because then you'll end up sort of tucking it under, and you don't want to do that. You just want to push down with the whole smoother. So I'm just going to push it down just until that paste touches the board all the way around. So just whiz round. I mean, it's pretty good anyway. Just until it touches all the way around. And then you can actually use your knife just to sort of run around that bottom edge, just to leave, so it's the same kind of thickness gap all the way round. So when you come to stack your sugar pasted cakes up, you've got a lovely clean line around the edge where they meet. So that is my super quick run through of how I cover a cake with sugar paste. And I hope that's made life a little bit easier for you. So give it a go and see how you get on.